This video is sponsored by our friends at Squarespace. Replacing ET Adventure at Universal Studios Japan, Space Fantasy The Ride opened to the public on the 18th of March 2010. What is essentially Universal's answer to Space Mountain at Disneyland, the story itself is far more complicated than its Disney counterpart, and features a dying sun, a space fairy princess, and a bunch of cute stardust characters that are embracing the sweet release of death in a pact to save the sun. I'm not making any of that up. As somebody who speaks no Japanese, this ride has lovingly received the name Fever Dream, the ride, and will leave you grinning ear to ear thinking, what the f? So join us as we decipher the ancient texts of Universal Creative to discover the secrets, story, history, and behind-the-scenes goodies of Universal Studios Japan's Space Fantasy, the ride. In March of 2009, Universal Studios Japan announced that they would be closing ET Adventure on May 10th of the same year. Following the ride's closure, the ride system itself was removed, but the attraction was bizarrely temporarily reopened as a walkthrough called ET Adventure The Legend, which would run for only 5 days from July 18th, 2009. Checking historic crowd calendars, this wasn't a particularly busy time that demanded the extra capacity that the ride would give, and in a press release announcing this strange decision, Universal Studios Japan mentioned that the move was in response to many guests missing the finale of the official attraction, which provided dreams and excitement to more than 30 million people since its opening. Universal Studios Japan is the busiest non-Disney theme park in the world, and it would make sense for them to open the attraction temporarily to relieve crowds, but it appears that this was not the case. On September 14th, 2009, the park announced a new indoor ride that would be replacing ET Adventure. Full details were not yet released, but they did state that it would be space-themed, and the ride track would measure 585 meters in length. In December, Universal Studios Japan officially announced Space Fantasy The Ride, and it was scheduled to open on March 18th, 2010, only a couple of months down the line. The attraction is a spinning roller coaster manufactured by Mack Rides, a family-owned German amusement ride manufacturer whose owner also operates Europa Park. As of 2019, 146 Mack roller coasters exist around the world, with the most popular coasters including DC Rivals at Warner Bros. Movie World and Helix at Liseberg, Sweden. The ride layout of Space Fantasy The Ride was entirely custom-built to fit within the existing show building of ET Adventure, which allowed for the quick turnaround of only 9 months between ET's closure and Space Fantasy's opening. Utilizing a spinning roller coaster was a smart move on Universal's behalf. Considering the size constraints of the 62-foot-tall show building that ET was originally housed in, this 1,900-foot-long ride only ever reaches a height of 23 feet, with a maximum speed of 36 feet per second, or just shy of 25 miles per hour. In the open air, this would be an extremely dull experience, but combining an enclosed space, darkness, theming, and the spinning of the vehicle, Space Fantasy is able to create a relatively thrilling experience over its 275-second-long journey. Considering that this is one of the busiest theme parks in the world, the ride has 19 trains with 2 cars at its disposal, which can hold a total of 8 guests per train, providing a theoretical best-case capacity of 1,920 riders per hour. For context, DC Rivals, which we mentioned earlier, has a capacity of 960 riders per hour, with Space Fantasy being almost double that, even smashing Disney's Space Mountain, which can only handle 1,565 guests per hour. Space Fantasy The Ride is rather strangely located in the Hollywood section of Universal Studios Japan. Its facade is an interesting blend of Hollywood's Art Deco style combined with futuristic accents to not stand out too much against the rest of the land, but realistically it's relatively easy to miss the attraction on first passing because of its rather humble appearance. Before entering, there are 3 queues that guests can choose from. There is the Single Rider Queue, Standby, and Universal Express Pass, which is a paid fast-track option available at Universal Studios Japan. I've been to the park twice, and with proper planning, I've never felt the need to use Express Pass, but during busy periods, it can be a valid option. Just keep in mind that the system used at USJ is much different to those in the US parks. In some cases, is even more expensive than a day ticket, and is honestly pretty confusing. You buy a one-time use only pass for a selection of specific attractions, with some being time designated. If given the option, just aim for a quieter period to go, but if you really want to learn more about Universal Studios Japan Express Pass, I highly recommend the Ultimate Trip Planning Guide from TDR Explorer, link in the description. After choosing your line, you're now ready to set forth on your space adventure. But first, you need a locker. Thankfully, they're free. The ride doesn't allow for any loose articles such as bags or purses, and it's for good reason. The ride spins. Your bag would become a projectile during the first corner, and Universal just doesn't need that from you right now. Once your items are safely put away, you're ready to learn where your space fantasy will take you in the first pre-show where you meet G-Bot. Originally, this character was a flying satellite-type robot using KUKA arm technology that would soar around gas, but in a recent refurbishment, G-Bot has been relegated to just a large screen instead. This part is completely in Japanese, with no English translations available at all, so this is our best attempt to translate it. Nice to meet you, I'm G-Bot. In fact, there is an important message for everyone. Apparently, good news and bad news came from beyond the universe. The bad news is that the power of the sun is disappearing. What's the good news? Humans have the power to save the sun. By the way, humans, you can finally talk. First of all, what should I talk about? I'm receiving a very important message. Wait a minute. Hello? Yes, I got it. Yes, excuse me, huh? I was calling from Cosmia right now. Now everyone has to go help the sun. Welcome. Bye-bye. Now this is the first of two pre-shows, and you may wonder why there are two. Well, the scene with G-Bot is a clever way to introduce the attraction whilst giving staff an opportunity to sort out guests. Once they're indoors, it's hard to send them back out, so they make sure that nobody has any loose articles before entering the building. Considering that G-Bot is mostly an auditory experience, you have plenty of time to sort yourself or other guests out without worrying whether you're going to miss anything. It's a well-crafted addition to slow people down and sort them out. Speaking of well-crafted, have you seen our website eisnerpie.com? Well, apparently 329 of you have, and I'm damn proud. Just like how this week's sponsor would be damn proud of that segue, who is Squarespace. Now, I have a degree in IT, but Luke does not. He has a degree in drama, and he was able to make eisnerpie.com all on his own in like 15 minutes. It's a simple yet powerful tool which allows you to create incredible looking websites with little web design experience. Using their analytics suite, I'm able to show you that one person from the Republic of Korea has been enlightened by our glorious website. Nice. And that domain, eisnerpie.com, well, we added that from Squarespace in a couple of clicks. Double nice. Get yourself to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/ReviewTyme to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Now back to space! G-Bot is technically outdoors, and after he has finished speaking, guests are now ushered indoors to the second pre-show. In the center of the room is a model of the sun, and on the outside are screens where you will receive your message from Solar Princess Cosmia. I, Solar Princess Cosmia, and Sun Fairy have come to tell us about the emergency. The power of the sun is weakening. Soon, the Earth will be enveloped in a dark world. There is still hope. The only power that can revive the sun is the energy in you humans. Join us in a crucial mission to save everyone's sun and the Earth. After passing through the passage, you will arrive at the shuttle port, where the solar shuttle will carry you and fly into the sun. Press the red button in the sun and pour your energy into it. Energy saves the sun. Give courage! It seems strange to have two pre-shows back to back before you even enter the bulk of the queue, but I believe the idea with the second one is to ensure that guests' eyes have enough time to adjust to the dark setting of space fantasy. It is indoors after all, and Universal doesn't really want guests tripping over each other as they struggle to see after getting out of the sun. As you exit the room where you meet Princess Cosmia, you're introduced to the small sun sprite characters, which seem to be followers or pets of the princess. Projected against the wall utilizing 3D projections, they actually interact with guests' movements. The interactive technology within this attraction was constructed by a US-based company called GestureTech. During this 85-foot-long hallway, the walls are able to detect the movement of 132 hands on 66 guests without them physically touching the wall itself. COVID-safe approved. It does this by using an array of 22 3D cameras and 13 projectors connected to an array of 16 quad-core computers. Now, back in the early 2010s, that was a lot of quad-core computers. Beyond this point, it's rather uneventful before you get to the loading dock. You weave through dark, generic sci-fi hallways while screens inform you about the safety information relevant to the ride. Finally, you step into the ride's loading atrium, which screams late 2000s utopian futurism with grand, white, arching pillars against the dark void of space. The guests may notice something different from other roller coasters that they've ridden. Space Fantasy the Ride features a conveyor belt loading system instead of the traditional stop-start load which most people are used to. This system allows the ride to achieve its crazy throughput of 1,920 riders per hour because it honestly never stops. And now it's your turn to join that never-ending cycle as you lock yourself in, leave the station, and are once again greeted by Princess Cosmia. May your energy shine and become a hero for the sun. Get ready. Don't forget the red button. What she is referring to is the big red button in front of you. Thematically, the ride vehicle is designed as a spaceship. The dome-like protrusions on the side of the trains are to collect stardust, whilst the red button is used to release it. You can only use it at particular times in the ride though. How do you gather this stardust? With these bad boys, also known as your arms. The GestureTech technology isn't just featured at the start of the queue for fun, it's to introduce guests to the interactive elements of the attraction which are actually featured throughout. Also, the train features onboard audio to enhance the ride. Shrouded in darkness, you start on Earth as the sun's power is dwindling. After a short lift hill, you encounter frozen voids and dodge nebulas as you make your way towards the sun, avoiding the dangers and wonders that exist within the solar system. These effects are achieved through projections, lasers, and fiber optics. Space Fantasy is set in space, an area that is not known for being particularly bright. Similar to Space Mountain, this lack of visual context allows the ride to feel much more intense than it actually is, but has the consequence of making for an awful YouTube video if I was going to go over every single thing that happens within the ride. I will, however, go over the story beats so that if you have the opportunity to ride the attraction in the future, or have ridden it yourself, then you have the necessary context to know what on earth is actually going on. Throughout the 275-second-long experience, the trains perform controlled magnetic spins and uncontrolled gravity spins, meaning that every ride will be different in some regards. If you have someone who is heavier on one side and lighter on the other, the ride will actually spin a lot more intensely than if it was evenly distributed. Reaching the second lift hill, you hear from Cosmia once again, who is informing you that it's time to collect the stardust. Wave your hands like a mad person towards the surrounding screens. It's hero time. After this section, there is more space adventuring, until on the final lift hill, you're asked to finally release the stored energy in a bid to save the sun. You spin into your final helix, where you're suddenly shocked by the loudest sound you will ever hear and the brightest light that will blind you for seconds. I'm not kidding, this final sunroom is terrifying, mainly because it is an absolute assault to the senses. And with that, you've finally fulfilled your duty. You restored the sun and its energy. The sun sprites are now blowing themselves up in glee, and Cosmia says her goodbye with, "The sun is shining now more than ever. Thank you, heroes." Space Fantasy the Ride is generally an all-around good time. For a non-Japanese speaking person, it feels like an absolute trip, and when you have no idea what you've just experienced, it is something that has stuck with me to this day. Winner of the 2011 Thea Award for Outstanding Achievement, it's memorable, exciting, and unique to Universal Studios Japan, and I believe that anybody who has the opportunity should experience this crazy attraction. Though, depending on when you go to USJ, Space Fantasy might be different from what we just mentioned. Part of the Cool Japan strategy and national branding effort to promote the country as cool to non-Japanese people, the attraction has seasonal overlays presented via VR or changes to the visuals of the ride. One version Luke and I got to experience was promoting a band called Dreams Come True, which featured these horrifying characters. As well as I've seen a Final Fantasy overlay and I believe one from Monster Hunter as well. On Luke's second trip to the park, he got to experience the VR overlay for the attraction called Evangelion XR. In this version though, the trains are locked off so they can't spin, instead following a storyline that for an English speaker who doesn't know what Evangelion is, may be even more confusing than normal Space Fantasy the Ride. But no matter the overlay, Space Fantasy is always a good time. Have you experienced this attraction? We'd love to know in the comments below what you thought about Space Fantasy the Ride. For the home of all things theme parks, I'm Dom from ReviewTyme. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing.